I apologize, we're getting started a little bit late. We were trying to find the lavalier microphone so that Sister Clare can move at her will. So she'll be able to do that now. Again, welcome to all of the familiar faces that I see and to many of the new faces. It's nice to have you here at St. Jerome's. It's a particular delight for me tonight to welcome back to the Waterloo region, because she really is no stranger to the separate school boards in this area, a school sister of Notre Dame with a long history here at St. Jerome's, and a woman who really does not need much introduction in this area, and I think the testament is that the number of you who've showed up this evening to hear her. It is a real pleasure. Sister Clare Fitzgerald is a school sister of Notre Dame, as I mentioned. She's a member of the Northeast Province in the United States of the School Sisters. She served as their provincial superior for a number of years, as well as the president of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious in the United States, all of the women religious in the United States. I forgot my real notes, so let's see how well I can do this from memory. I know Sister Clare received her undergraduate degree, certainly from Notre Dame College in Baltimore, Maryland. Her doctorate from St. Louis, I believe. Forgive me, I just lost my notes. Sister Clare has received a number of honorary degrees as well. She was for at least 9 years the chair of the Department of American Studies at Fairfield University in Fairfield, Connecticut, before moving to Boston College to become the founder and longtime director of the leadership program for Catholic education in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at Boston College. And in that area, she is a truly distinguished woman known throughout the world for her work in that Catholic leadership program. I could take up an enormous amount of time now talking about the various awards and honors and distinctions that have been Sister Clare's. She has received just about every award available from the National Catholic Education Association in the United States. And rather than try to list them all, they're all in the brochure. But you may have noticed that back, I believe it was in 1986, she was awarded at that time the Outstanding Educators Award of the entire National Catholic Education Association. And it was the first of many other awards she received. She shared with me tonight that she's quite happy to have been informed just yesterday that this year in Los Angeles, she will be given that same award yet another time as the outstanding contributor to Catholic education in the United States of America. So it is indeed an honor and delight to welcome her. She's lectured throughout the world, most recently in Oxford University, in Cambridge, at St. Andrews in Scotland, not the golf course, but the college, and really in Guam, Puerto Rico, throughout the United States, and is really quite well known here in Canada. So it is a great honor and pleasure to be able to introduce Sister Clare, who will speak on Catholic education at the Millennium, Memories, Murmurings, and the Mission. Welcome to St. Jerome's and welcome back to Waterloo, Sister Clare Fitzgerald.
Okay. He's checking something. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. We okay? Oh, okay. Maybe that's it. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see some old friends here. How are you? Now I think I can grab your attention. Trying to see if I can get no static. You okay back there? He's testing, okay? One, two, three. That's okay now. I think we got it. Thank you. someone suggested that maybe you would like to discuss the sex life of the President of the United States. He says it's on 2020 tonight. Don't miss it. I think I'd rather watch Nass Bridges. I'm quite honored to be here. We're still having difficulty, huh?
Don't touch the mic.
That's what I get for saying something against my dear president. All right, are we okay? That's better. I think that's it. Keep my hands off it, huh? All right, thank you, Jared. Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I always have to smile after you get an introduction like Jay was doing. I always want to say, may she rest in peace, amen. We had a celebration at our mother house in Wilton, Connecticut, and School Sisters of Notre Dame, and our province was founded in 1961, and they decided they would put the pictures up of the 5 or 6 provincials, and it's like you're walking in and you see a picture on the wall. You want to just say a prayer, because it's like it's all over, you know what I mean? We're dead, we're finished, it's on the wall now. I promised, and we just had dinner over to our university club, which was very delightful, and I promised a gentleman there by the name of Ken McLaughlin. Where is he? Oh, there he is. Oh, I am going to do it. He's neat, this philosopher, Not too much into the real world we were talking about tonight. Philosophers live in those other worlds, and he was after me on reality tonight while I'm trying to enjoy a prime rib dinner. And he's after me because it's Friday night. It was all the more enjoyable, I think. But I promised him I'd get even with him because he was talking about immigration. I guess he's teaching something on immigration. He was talking about the Irish. So I wanted to get back to him very carefully tonight, and I thought I'd begin by doing something about the Irish. My name is Fitzgerald. I'm from Boston. There was a time I'd go through the whole Kennedy relationship, but it's getting a little scandalous too, so I'm kind of playing the thin ice with that one. But I have a very good friend, a Franciscan father, and he's an Italian. Do I have any Italians here? Okay. Do I have any Irish here? Okay, you don't have too many Irish, though, huh? So I have to play with this, but because I want to get back at this McLaughlin, I'm going to do an Irish takeoff. But I was doing a mission for this priest friend of mine during last Lent, and St. Patrick's Day happened to come on a Sunday last year. And I was on the altar sitting with the servers, and Father was the pastor of this parish. So he got up and he wanted to get something. He wanted to get something on Sister Clare. So he said, I don't know what day is today, March 17th. Who is this St. Patrick anyhow? And he said, I don't know, everybody's getting so excited. So he continued to give his homily, denigrating the Irish and these things, all in very good fun. And of course the people in the church were laughing because they knew that I was sitting up there and getting a little bit angry by the minute, you see. So, as is wont in the Catholic Church, I couldn't get my revengeful moment until the communion reflection. Now that whole little statement is open for a lot of debate, but I'm just saying it. So I had to wait. But we women are used to waiting in the church, so I waited till my turn came after the communion. Then I was allowed to say a few words. So I got up and I merely wanted to say to my Italian friend that it's been proven beyond doubt now that Jesus Christ, God, is Irish. And the first proof we have, Ken McLaughlin, is that he was 30 years old and he was still living at home. And the second, Ken McLaughlin, is that he was 30 years old, unmarried, unemployed, and living at home with his mother. And the third that really clinches it beyond any doubt is that Jesus Christ, 30 years old, he's unmarried, he's unemployed, he's living at home, and his mother thinks he's God. Now, you got to come from an Irish family to appreciate that little one. Okay. What I'd like to do this evening is talk a bit about Catholic education. I think it might be this. And the millennium. But I want to do it in maybe just a little different way. As an educator, I like to talk about two things. One is time, and one is task. And I say to all educators, you have to know, first of all, the time you are living in if you are ever going to determine the task that you have to do, say, in that classroom. There's a wonderful mythologist, Joseph Campbell, died a few years ago. Bill Moyers ran a series on him on television. I think some of you have seen it. But I have my students read his book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. And in that book, Joseph Campbell says something about this time we're living in. And he puts it this way: if you are living now, it is like being in the theater and a bell is ringing. If you've ever been to Broadway, a bell rings when the curtain's going up. A bell is ringing, and it is signaling the rising up of a curtain on a brand new play. You and I sitting in the audience, and the curtain goes up. And he says, and when that play is over, when that curtain comes down, something that you have known and loved will have died, but something new would have been born. There's a Paschal mystery in that sentence. There's a dying and a rising. The old familiar life horizon is no longer there. The old familiar patterns of behavior no longer fit. I love those two lines. The old familiar life horizon is no longer there. If you're an educator, most of us know the family life isn't there in a sense. If you're religious, you certainly know the religious life that we entered is no longer there. The old familiar life horizon is no longer there. The patterns of behavior no longer fit. Patterns of behavior. I used to teach the third grade. I used to say to the kids in the third grade, stop your fidgeting. Now, fidgeting is a marvelous word. Today they have attention deficit syndrome. It's an entirely thing. The patterns of behavior no longer fit. You kind of knew the behavior patterns of kids. They'd poke each other, they'd throw snowballs in the schoolyard. The usual punching in line and thing. The pattern of behavior. Now we don't even understand some of the behavior patterns of the students. And Joseph Campbell says these lines: we are standing on the threshold of a time of transformation. Now, Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, can say that. Rudolf Schneckenberg is a German theologian, and he puts it just a little bit differently about time. And he says, we are always summoned by the events of history to perform the tasks God has assigned for our time. You got to know the events of history. What's happening around here? Historically, politically, culturally, ecclesially, what's going on? Because what's going on summons us to perform tasks that God has assigned for this time. The worst thing you and I can do as educators is to go into classrooms and doing tasks that belong to another time, another age, another world, and another church. We do a disservice to the children in our care. There's a wonderful book I recommend to educators. It's called Two Dancers in the Desert. It's really the story of Charles Foucault. But in it, he has an interesting remark. He says, when I was very young, 21, I went to a Catholic institution of learning in Paris. And he said, I went there at a time, now notice that, time, when it was very much the in thing to be an atheist. Or at least, the yuppies would walk the corridors of the universities and poke each other and say, you don't believe in this God. Or at least just highly skeptical about faith and miracles and all this stuff and prayer and all this, you see. This was what they laughed at. And Charles Foucault says, I had excellent teachers. They were pedagogically good. They were very good people, but God, they were bad for me. Because they were so darn neutral about everything. They didn't have a clue what was going on. They never once addressed the questions or the events of the time, what the world that those students were living in, and challenged them to say, hey, wait a minute, let's look at that, you see. Excellent educators, good people, but bad for me. And we educators have to stop and pause and think, how good are we? How bad are we? As we walk into our classrooms to present our discipline, if you will, perhaps, ignorant, and not even wanting to discuss some of the things in which our children have to experience in the world. Time and task. David Tracy is a theologian, and he has a wonderful line about our time. He says, we're living at a time that can't even name itself. So it uses the word postmodern, post-industrial, post-Christian, post-colonialism. All it's sure of is it's after something. It's post. It's a wonderful little line. Mary Jo Leddy, I think Jay was saying she received an honorary doctorate here. Mary Jo Leddy, being a Canadian, I wanted to use a Canadian for imagery, because I like to work with an image when I talk about the Catholic school system here in Ontario. Mary Jo Leddy at one time wrote a book called The Reweaving of Religious Life. We religious congregations use that book quite often. But in it, she has a lovely little paragraph when she starts. And her imagery is a loom and a weaver. And what she does is this. She says, one day, I was watching a friend weaving a scarf on a loom. She suddenly reached down to an old, used sweater, one that she had worn for years. She began to examine it. Then she began to pull some of the old, but still strong threads from out that sweater. And she took those old, strong threads and she put them together with the new ones. And she began to weave again. She realized that she had no clear pattern or design, but she kept on moving the shuttle. What she did know was that she was making something new, that in God's good time, a new design would reveal itself. Now take that imagery. Take that old sweater, those strong old threads that she wove with the new to come out with a new design. And out of that imagery, she began to do her book. And she did it in 4 or 5 chapters. But the title of the chapters are what I want to pick up when I want to talk about Catholic education in Ontario. Her first chapter is, what is the texture of the fabric of our times? In other words, what's going on? What's the fabric? What's the texture? What's the historical context of our time? 2, she said, there is a threadbare moment when all the threads begin to unravel and they're all around on the ground and the floor. I went to do a chapter for a religious congregation, and they used this imagery, and I walked in, and they had a huge loom, and they had all these threads, all different color threads, all over the floor, all snarled up and everything. In other words, everything's in a mess. How are we going to untangle it all? Threadbare moment, the unraveling of the old pattern. 3rd, she said, we have to find the strands of the threads of the Holy Spirit. And her 4th chapter is, once you found them, then you begin to reweave a new pattern. The texture of the fabric, the sign of the times, the historical story, the faith journey of Catholic education in Ontario. Oh, I love to do this. I love coming up. I always say, God, what's going to happen next up here? I've been coming up for the last 5 years, and it's been exhilarating what's going on in education. I came up in 1996, and I thought I was doing the right thing. And I said to the teachers, there must have been 1,000 or 1,500 teachers, and I said to them, I thought I'd begin very Canadian-like, see. You know, the man at the customs office greets me by name, you know. He always says, Sister Clare, you back, you know? So I said to them, congratulations. It's a wonderful celebration. It's the 10th anniversary of Bill 30. Glazed look. Yeah, you know, a teacher, when you get that glazed, vacant look, as if to say, we don't know what you're talking about. So I looked at him and I said, well, aren't you celebrating? They didn't have a clue what Bill 30 was. And so I had to go back, you know. I said to them, well, let me just go back a little bit. It seems to me that in 1986 you passed Bill 30. Mm-hmm. It's like I was doing a class last year, a freshman class, and freshmen, you know, the caps on backwards and everything. I said, the class of the Millennium. You know, they wouldn't even be able to spell it, much less tell me what it was. But, you know, it did nothing. Glazed. They didn't care whether they would class the Millennium at all, you know. But I was getting that look, so I said, wait a minute, 1986, 10 years ago, something historic occurred, Bill 30. Again, I'm getting glazed looks, you see. So I started to pick it up and go back a little. I said, okay. I said, Catholic education, the journey, the faith journey of Catholic education began in poverty, in need, in sacrifice, same as the States. There was a time when people were committed, had courage, made those sacrifices. The time of the selling chocolate almond candy bars, you know, and raffles, and bingos. I don't get bingo up here, but we have bingos, and we have spaghetti suppers, you see. So this is a time when people would volunteer their time extra, you see. They did low salaries. They had, they didn't have any resources, They were cutting Christmas cards up, to get little pictures to paint on bulletin boards. Poor, very poor. But the vocabulary is what I'm after. The vocabulary was self-sacrifice. The vocabulary. I love vocabulary because it tells me a lot. Volunteer, courage, commitment. People writing proposals, trying to get the government to give them a little bit more money and a little more funding. You get that marvelous urgency and sense of mission and purpose and meaning. And they would talk like that, you see. We got a vocabulary now that talks about bureaucracy, financial, updating, bottom lines, careers. Very interesting how vocabulary tells you the shift of thinking in people. I was here recently and I said something about somebody. I said, why wouldn't that man do that? And the woman said to me, he won't do that. It's not a CPM. And I looked at her and said, what's a CPM? She says, career promotion movement. He's not going to do it. Might interfere with his promotion. It's not a career promotion movement. I'm interested in vocabulary. I'm watching to see the shift of language, which shows you very much a shift of perception about who you are and what you're doing. That happened, and then in 1986, Bill 30 came along. Now, in essence, Bill 30 gave you what we might say almost full funding. I'm just going to put it in general terms there. But the point was, we made it. You got the funding, I think, to the 13th level and so on and so forth, whatever. But you got funding. You got resources. You got better salaries. New buildings could go up. Most people claimed, when Bill 30 was passed, that you had reached the promised land. I'll come back to that. You had reached the promised land, okay. Well, if you look between 1986 and 1996, and you try to look at what happened in those 10 years, I found it so interesting. You had 4 provincial governors in 10 years. You had 7 ministers of education. You had destructuring. You had what we call benchmarking. You had a Royal Commission on Learning that gave you 167 recommendations. You had the common curriculum given to you. Now, but that was a very interesting thing as somebody coming from the States, and I've read all this. Oh, I've read every bill you have. I have boxes marked Canada. The nuns are falling over them and saying, you're going to move this stuff. I have read everything there is to know about Canada and all your bills. But the interesting thing about the common curriculum was that I'll put it this way, they did 3 editions of it. In the first edition, the Roman Catholic separate school system was given 1 sentence. In the second edition, which was given to the families, to the parents, you were not mentioned at all. And in the third edition of the common curriculum, the Roman Catholic school system was given a footnote. Now, your Catholic headquarters in Toronto wrote a pamphlet or booklet called Curriculum Matters, and out of that said, and I quote, "It is obvious that the government of the province of Ontario and the ministers of education do not recognize that the Roman Catholic separate school system has a distinctive organizational, needs that cannot be met in a common curriculum." It is obvious, isn't it? It is obvious, and I'm quoting directly from Curriculum Matters written by the Catholic School Office in Toronto. It is obvious that the taxpayer of Ontario is refusing to pay for a duplicate educational system, and the comments among many of the people of Ontario is, and I quote, that the Catholic school system is an historical anomaly and a constitutional anachronism. And my response to that would have been, in 1996 up here, is, whose fault is that? Whose fault is it that somebody does not recognize our distinctiveness? Whose fault is it that we may look like a duplicate educational system? Whose fault is it that the people are saying that we are a historical anomaly and a constitutional anachronism? Interesting. In this Curriculum Matters, issued by your Catholic school headquarters in Toronto, they took up that comment that the teachers began to think that 1986 put us in the promised land. Now, if you know anything about the promised land in Scripture, you have two stories going on. You have Exodus in Scripture, which takes them out of Egypt, moves them out of Egypt. And they get to the promised land, and my question is, what happened to them when they got to the promised land? Remember, they are marching through the desert, ragtag, tent makers, poor, depending on God for everything, every need. They're poor people, stragglers, tent makers. And they get to the promised land after 40 years. And the tribes of Israel become what? Watch the language change in Scripture. They become the kingdom of Israel. Kingdom. They will have kings, Solomon, David. They will have a kingdom. They will acquire great wealth. They will have an army. They will have a capital city. They will have a temple of gold, so to speak. They become very content and comfortable and well-to-do. And what happens in Scripture? Yahweh looks down. You're all right already. Where's my people? I cannot find my people anymore. They look exactly like the kingdom of the Philistines. They look exactly like the kingdom of the Babylonians. You see, there's no distinctiveness. They're like everybody else. And what does Yahweh do? In the story of the destruction, when you have the Israelites, the kingdom gets destroyed by the Babylonians, and Yahweh's people are taken out of that promised land of comfort and security and money and all this, and they are brought into exile. And you have the story of the exile. You have them lamenting in prisons and jails. How can we sing the Lord's song in this strange land? We're in jail. Who's going to hear us? These pagans don't care about anything. Why? What happened to them? And you have the prophet Jeremiah saying to them, hey, cut your whining. You got exactly what you deserved because you forgot who you were. You forgot your roots. You forgot you're God's people. You forgot that, and because of that, you are now in exile. And until you get your act together, until you begin to be who you are really, until you get again those roots, you will stay in this exile. Now that's a powerful imagery of 10 years, of 86 to 87. And I found it quite interesting and kind of an anomaly that in 1989, 3 years after Bill 30 passed, your bishops wrote a pastoral, A Moment of Promise. And they bishops are never prophetic, but they were prophetic because, I quote, they said, now that you have, or we have, financial security, let us now tend to more important matters. How are we going to maintain the Catholic character of our institutions? That was a prophetic statement in 1989. Now that you've got that, when are you going to tend to the Catholic character of your institutions? Interesting remark by your bishops. At 1996, when I was up here, I said to them, you had Bill 104 passed. And I kept saying to the teachers I was up here, somebody's nipping at your heels here. I use a little phrase, nipping at your heels. Bill 104. This was the cutting away of your governance structures. This was looking at boards of trustees. This was looking at forming Catholic school council boards, things like that. This was trying to get your board of directors and cut them down, you see. Everything was looking at the governance, beginning to start to kind of peel away at the governance structure, mostly, of the system, be it public or Catholic. The government in 1996 and between that and 97 began to say, we are going to change the entire model of funding for education. I'm not talking Catholic schools, I'm talking education. There is going to be less money, less dollars for education, so you better start prioritizing what is it that you're going to keep in your school and what is it that you're going to give up. Now, I do a lot on that because you had to begin to say, what is it that you value? What is it that you're going to keep when there's less money and less dollars? Because really, every bottom line, every budget that you do is a breathing, living mission statement. How you spend your money. When I was provincial of my congregation, I wanted to look at the finances of our mother house in Connecticut. So we have a portfolio with Merrill Lynch. So I had them come over. I wanted them to look at a simple thing as the telephone system. Is this a good telephone system we got? Or can we save money in something else? This kind of thing. It was kind of like a stewardship. Are we using the resources of the community? And so one morning, three gentlemen, three-piece suit and briefcase from Merrill Lynch, New York, Wall Street, came over to the front door of my provincial house and so on. So I welcomed them all, and we had a room and computers and everything for them and so on. And they were going to stay about 3 days and look at everything and then to give us some kind of advice. So I said to them, everything's on the desks that you need. If you need anything, just let us know. But on each of the 3 desks that we had, you will find a blue folder. And in the blue folder, you will find the mission statement of the School Sisters of Notre Dame. And the man who was like the chairperson says to me, Sister, I don't need your mission statement. I just have to read you how you spend your money, and I will tell you the mission of your congregation. And I've never forgotten that a budget is a living, breathing mission statement. Where you spend your money tells you where you put your priorities. Very interesting point. 1997, Bill 160. Mr. Snowballin becomes the man, huh? Now, I had dinner with Mr. Snowballin. Mr. Snowballin was an interesting man. Then I come up a little bit later and he's gone and Johnson's in, so I have to learn all this. But I had dinner with Mr. Snowballin. He couldn't understand a nun who was a political scientist. I'm a political scientist. So he said, you're into politics, political science, and you're a nun? I said, well, I'm Fitzgerald. I'm from Boston. What did you expect? I mean, it's kind of like in the genes, if you know what I mean. See? So I was doing this with him, but he said, you're interested in politics? I said, well, yes. I said, in the States, we call it organized crime. But I found what I call the most political move of the evening. We were at a big banquet, and Mr. Snowden was sitting at the table with me, and we were beginning the banquet, and they asked the bishop to give the grace, say grace. So the bishop went up, and of course he begins the grace very nicely, you see. And then he turns, to Mr. Snowden, and he so gently, and may the Holy Spirit enlighten our Minister of Education with wisdom and understanding, and knowledge. It's like putting the knife in and smiling it all the time you're doing it. It was the most deft political move of the evening was done by that bishop in that prayer for Mr. Snowden. Bill 160. That kind of began to hit home a little bit because it began to move into the school. I'm putting this all very briefly, but I'm just trying to give you a trend as to where we are now and what we're going to do about it. But Bill 160 got to things like class size. You see, it came right into the school building. It started to talk about not only the curriculum, but it talked about what each classroom, what standards should be done, what courses, what lessons should be taught, what has to be done, you see, the class size, the teacher preparation time. When I was up here doing a retreat for the principals of the high schools, they were saying, the teachers are going crazy because they may have to teach another period in high school, or they may lose a preparation time, you see. So you began, and this whole talk about hiring non-accredited teachers, you see, and this non-certifiable, all this began to come in because that began to hit home, right to the teachers, you see, that began right to the classrooms. They're going to lengthen the school day. They're going to lengthen the school year. All this began to come in much of 160. I'm just hitting those fine points because what happened was that precipitated the strike. Now, the last image I have is I was at our mother house here in Hamilton, Waterdown. And we were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen, and we were listening to the television, and of course, would the strike happen? It was going to be called the next day on that Monday, were they going to have it or not going to have it? And I can remember the sisters got a car for me to go back to the airport on Monday morning, and I can remember how forcibly it struck me to go by a Catholic school and see those teachers out, the signs on strike. And I kind of, I let out a sigh, and the driver said, do you know them? I said, yeah, I know them. I know them and I love them, and I know how hard it is for them to be out there. But the last thing I saw was you come out on strike against this Bill 160. And all that happened in that, okay? It's the last thing. So between that and the Christmas, I had to call somebody and say, now tell me, what happened that brings me to this moment right now? What are we doing? Well, I had to get this whole thing done. What I found out was Bill 160 passed. Now, you know more than I do, but I was a little startled at that. I watched that strike out for 2 weeks, and I'm thinking, they're going to beat this thing then. They're out for 2 weeks. They're really staying out there. What's really going to go? I have to tell you, because all I'm just saying, and I'm waiting to see what happens, and someone says, no, it passed. Mr. Johnson is the Minister of Education. But two very important things happened in the last 2 months. Bill 160 passed, but also the Catholic school system got two things very important. You got equity of governance and equity of funding of public schools. Equity, equal. So you can no longer say, if only we had a little more money, huh? You've got equity of governance, your governing structure, and equity of funding. And someone said to me, this is a moment of grace. What else happened? You had 53 Roman Catholic separate school system boards, educational boards. You now have 29. You had 705 boards of trustees. You now got 263, and everyone must receive the same amount of money, $5,000. You had some people on public school boards earning $50,000 in the area of Toronto. I see it. I might do a little dance here. $50,000. I read Snowball's letter saying, boards of trustees are getting $50,000. It's a second job. You know, you read that and I say to myself, everybody's getting $50,000 on the board of trustees? Because I had talked to boards of trustees. You know, it wasn't true. It wasn't true at all. There was not that, you know, across the board. But now, everybody's going to get the same. A board of trustee member can only earn $5,000. You have 1,350 elementary and secondary schools, and you have 1,860 school council members now. Those school councils are becoming part of that educational system, is what I'm getting at. As of March 31st, 1998, yet to come, principals and vice principals are divorced from any teachers' union or association. They cannot join it. As of December 17th, 1997, Section 136 of the Education Act in your Constitution was struck down by a judge named Sharp. 136 said, we now have the freedom, is what I'm going to say. By striking it down means that a principal or an administrator may now hire Catholics in the Catholic school system of the same Roman Catholic faith, and can hire them for promotion and planning and all this. Before, you might have had to hire public school, or you might have had to hire non-Catholic, but 136 is struck down and declared unconstitutional, and this Judge Sharp said, now you now have the right to hire Catholics if you want to hire Catholics. That's going to be open for an appeal. I mean, they figure some people are going to fight that one on you, but it's open. You are no longer referred to as the separate school system. You are now got the title of Roman Catholic School System of Ontario. You are no longer use the word separate. You are now going to be called the Roman Catholic School System. What does that mean? Now that's kind of where we are. That's that long history in there, but that's where we are. And I would end by saying that in that sentence there that there is emerging, I should say, there's emerging in the province of Ontario a whole new educational model. I'm not talking about Catholic now in this sense. I'm just saying there is a new educational model on the horizon. There certainly is a new funding system, a new funding model for education that you didn't have before, okay? But there is a new educational model emerging, and educators, it's high time. I'm just talking education now, because the model of education is a 19th century model. It's built out of an agricultural society. It comes out of, assembly lines. It does not fit the 21st century. You cannot put new wine in old wine casks. You see, you can't do that. The structures, the systems and the structures out of which you and I have been functioning, we grew up in. The institutions, be they church, be they government, be they economics, be they hospitals, be they schools, all those institutions were built with the thinking of a 19th century mentality. And they're starting to crumble. They cannot take the new wine. You have to find new structures in order to handle the new. So emerging slowly through that 21st century will be new educational structures, a new model. And my argument is that the Catholic school system and the public school system should have some collaboration in shaping that new model of education. Have something to say about it. how it's going to emerge. The Catholic educators have to be part of that dialogue and conversation with your government. The fear is you might go the way of Newfoundland, or you might go the way of Quebec, which changed its model from religion into languages. But there's a creeping, there's a nipping at the heels. What's going on? What's going on in this province? I was doing a chapter for some congregation in California recently, and when I walked into the room, they had a huge banner, and on it said, "We will never be the same again." You will never be the same again. Your educational system will never be the same again. It is now in the process of modeling itself. You have to grasp that. We're not going to go back to something new. We will never be the same again. Blazon that. If that's the world in which we're in, these are the events that have occurred, all the way through of Catholic education. What's the tasks then? That's the timing. That's the things that are going on here at the time. You could add a lot more. I'm just touching some very highlights, trying to give you a thread that goes along through here. Okay? So that you say, gosh, this is what got us here. When the man who was driving me here today said that higher education, I guess you would know better, he was telling me they're kind of protesting about the fees and they have to go take out loans, and there was some kind of a protest yesterday among students in colleges or higher ed about we'll be paying back loans for the rest of our life if we have to pay higher fees, to go to college and so on and so forth. So you've got that on the higher level, as he was telling me. What's the task then? What are we in this now Catholic school system? Not separate. That's interesting. You could write a paper on that. What does that mean, But you are now the Catholic school system. They're giving you that. Okay, what's the tasks? How do we reweave a design for Catholic education? First, like the old sweater, we must take the strong threads of the past. We have to go back to the roots from which we should never move, where we again discover our purpose, our ethos, our non-negotiable parameters, the things we say, no, these are the things that make us distinctive. Okay? We must be able and be certain that this Catholic school system holds to the principles that fired the early efforts and defined our essential meaning, purpose, ethos, and non-negotiables. Got to hold on to them. Those are our roots. We have a dual struggle. We struggle to be faithful to our religious roots, and we have to be authentic to our public commitment of education. We've got a dual thing going here for us. What is it that makes us distinctive and not duplicative? What do we answer to the people of Ontario who see us as a duplicate school system? I was talking tonight at dinner about lecturing in Cambridge University in England. In Cambridge, the people that were there came from countries like yours: England, Scotland, Wales, Germany, Australia. And we were holding an international conference on Catholic education, leadership training. And the interesting thing was, I, from the United States, was standing alone as an institution, Catholic institutions of learning that were not supported by government. Everybody else was, you see. So what they did was, They had very different ideas. A lot of them presented papers. But when they came together, they had a consensus on two very important points about a system. And they said, if you are in a Catholic institution that operates today in a dual system of governance, in other words, when you are supported by the government, first of all, you have to realize that you are functioning and trying to operate in a social, cultural, political, and even ecclesial context that challenges the very foundations of your distinctiveness. The whole political, cultural, social, even ecclesial milieu can challenge the very fundamental reason and purpose of our distinctiveness. That's scary. And secondly, if you are in a leadership position, see, we were dealing with the training of leaders for Catholic education, but if you're in a leadership position, you are in this existing and troubling context, and you have a dual task of priorities. If you are in leadership in this kind of a milieu, you have a dual task of priorities. One, you are to maintain the fundamental distinctiveness of that Catholic educational system. And secondly, though, you're not just to maintain it. You have got to reinvigorate it. You have got to re-symbolize it. You have got to redefine it. You have got to articulate it. And you have to make it have some meaning and understanding to an entirely new audience in a new world. You've got a whole new social, cultural, economic context out there, a different audience. So the leader has to make sure that you articulate it, that you know it, and that you articulate it to a whole new audience. Those are two tough jobs for a leader in an educational system today, in that kind of milieu. We're talking about mission statements at dinner, and I was at Boston College in our grad school of ed, and we were looking at a mission statement of our school, a sign of the times. We're sitting there, 15 of us around the table. And usually you can do the first sentence of a mission statement and nobody bothers you. You know, Boston College is a Catholic university under the auspices of the Jesuits, and it's located in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, period, and that's wonderful. Nobody ever challenges the first sentence. It's just locating the darn thing. Sign of the times. Hand goes up at the end of the table. Professor says, I don't like the word Catholic. I'm not a Catholic. There are a lot of non-Catholics here at the university on the faculty, and there are a lot of non-Catholics in the student body. I find it politically offensive here. Now, I don't mind, he says, if we retain the words Jesuit there. And I said, excuse me, sir, they're not synonymous terms. But you see, but now to my right, we're like 5 gentlemen. We call them the GI guys. You know, after World War II in the United States, they have what they call, you know, the GI Bill. Everybody could go to college, you know. So these guys coming home from the war, you know, went to Boston College, got their doctorates and the whole bit, stayed there and taught. Now they're readers in their parish and the whole bit, you know. There they are. They said, what do you mean? Of course we're going to be Catholic. What do you mean that's what our institution is? It's a Catholic institution, and that word Catholic is going to stay there and da. 5 years from now, those men are going to be gone. They're retired. I wonder what's going to happen at the table when somebody raises that question. Leadership. maintaining Catholic identity, but reinvigorating it and rearticulating and get the language so that it'd be understandable and meaningful to the new audience out there. Task. What do I mean when I say faithful to our roots? You begin there. I mean, we have an alternative view of reality. We have an alternative view of reality, and out of that alternative view of reality, we have a different view of education. And that alternative view of reality begins with the very important fundamental premise on which we operate from, and that is part of our distinctiveness. It's the base of the whole thing, and that is there's a God. We believe there's a God. And out of that story of that God comes everything else. He's the creator. He's the creator of the earth and the human beings and everything in it. And God so loved this world. He loved it so, he sent his only son to save it. Everything is wrapped up in that outrageous story. God so loved, he sent his son, Jesus Christ. Everything. We are rooted in that incarnation event. Thomas Merton says, we live our whole lives in the echo of the incarnation. God loved it so. And you and I haven't got a clue why he loved it so. But everything is into that Jesus Christ and his coming. And this Jesus Christ, the God-man, sent to redeem and to save a world and to have a relationship with humanity. He took on humanity. Anne Dillard, the poetess, has a wonderful thing about, I always use it at Christmas time, but I love it because it's long ago in Bethlehem, love became incarnate. God stood in the doorway between two worlds, and we were all afraid. God stood in the doorway between two worlds, and we were afraid. And the essence of our educational system is to proclaim, to celebrate, and to witness to the fact that he came and he lived, he preached, and that he died and he rose again. It's the essence, it's the heart of our story. And if we cannot proclaim it, if we cannot celebrate it liturgically, symbolically, ritually, sacramentally, and witness to it, which is even much more difficult, then we have no reason for being. That's our story. That we believe in. And out of that story comes everything else. And the point is that this Jesus Christ sent us to a world to proclaim himself and God. Proclaim the fact. I think it's Father Rollheiser who keeps saying, you and I are not here to save a world. It's already been saved. Jesus Christ did it. You and I do not save a world. Only thing that you and I do is to proclaim that he did it and to live our lives in such a way that we witness to the fact that he came. He was born, he lived, he died, he told us how to live. There it is. And if you can't do that, then what are we talking about? What's the credibility of the story? I always like to use Father O'Malley in Fordham Prep. He teaches high school, and one of the books he writes about Catholic high school kids. He said I was angry one day in class. He said I taught English, and he said I gave them 3 books to read, and they didn't read the books. He said, as mad as can be. I said, welcome to the real world. He was trying to teach them something about evil, so he told them to read The Exorcist, Helter Skelter, which is the Manson family, and Waiting for Godot. What he was after was evil. He wanted to have the kids be confronted and say, there's evil in the world. How do you handle that? And so on and so forth. But he said they didn't read it. So he said, I was angry. Oh, God, he said, I was angry. But he said, you know what? He said, in our Catholic institutions, maybe 5 days a week, maybe 40 weeks of the year, our kids hear God's name. They hear Jesus Christ. They say prayers. They have the gospel. They can hear that. They go to liturgies. And he said, you know what? He says, they don't blink an eyelash about that. And for that, I cry at night. Why does he cry? Because he said, if you hear what this Jesus Christ says, you want to save your life, you got to lose it. Unless the seed die, it's never going to bear any fruit. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the clean of heart. You got to be kidding. Nobody believes that stuff. His point is it should scare the hell out of these kids, and they don't blink an eyelash, which means they haven't got a clue what this Jesus Christ is saying. It should scare us to death almost, what he's asking us to do. And what do? We don't blink an eyelash. And he says, and for that I cry at night. And he's talking about kids in our Catholic schools. But because we believe in God, because we believe in our story of Jesus Christ, because we've been sent to a world, our educational system has a different purpose and meaning than public school. Every child that walks into our school, we view as a child of God. This child is on a journey. This child is on a journey home to God. We have them for just so many hours, so many days, so many weeks, so many years in our care. We only nourish them for that time along that journey home to God. But we got to nourish them spiritually and intellectually. Curiosity, learning, is not only intellectual, it is a spiritual pursuit. It is mind and soul together. That's a Catholic education. That child is sacred and holy. Public school system looks with the market mentality and says dollar sign. It costs us so much money to educate this kid. Everything is the dollar sign. It's a marketplace mentality. It's not a mission mentality. We come from a mission mentality. They come from a marketplace. Snowball and Johnson talk in terms of, we educate this child, and when the child graduates, we say to that child, how much do you know? What do you know? We don't do that. When we graduate them, we should say, what kind of a human being have you become? Big difference. Public education educates for teaching that child and educate it as an end in itself. Catholic education's end is the world. It is not the child as the end. We educate that child to be a good human being so that they can go into the world. The world is always the object and the goal of Catholic education. They go to transform the world. Excellence. I had a smile when I was reading Mr. Snowball, and we are going to run schools for excellence, high standards, and this kind of thing. He went on, I'm thinking, well, that's what we Catholic schools have always been about. But the thing I want to make about excellence in education is very simple. Excellence in education. When I talk to teachers, I say to a teacher, don't you dare walk into a classroom not prepared. Because excellence in education, high standards, knowledge, learning, is a Catholic characteristic. It is part of a Catholic identity. It's inherent to it. We go to a faculty meeting reluctantly, but we go. And the faculty say to me, now, Claire, if the dean says this, don't say anything. We want to get out, you say. But she has a bad habit of saying, I'm going to make Boston College, graduate school of education, I'm going to make it a second Harvard University. Now, Harvard University's down the street. Because the minute she would say that, somebody would pull my jacket and say, down, down. Don't dare get up. And say, because it used to get me riled at that. But I have to get up, see. I'd say, excuse me, Dean, but why would anybody at this Catholic Jesuit institution of learning, why would you ever want to make it a second Harvard? Harvard was founded in 1636. It's a 17th century, institution. Learning and knowledge and scholarship goes back to Benedict and the monks. They were the scholars. The church saved Europe in the Dark Ages with its learning and its art and its music. We have always been the harbingers of the intellectual life. To be a Catholic school is to place a high priority on learning and excellence in education. That's a hallmark. That is part of the identity that we talk about. Harvard, John Harvard's bronze statue in the Harvard Yard has as its motto, he's standing there, and at the base of his statue, it says, Christus et Ecclesia. Christ and the church. It was a seminary. All the Ivy League schools were seminaries. All of them began with religious connotations. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, all those you see. I don't know whether Harvard would recognize God today at all. But there John Harvard stands in that yard still today with the motto that used to be Harvard's motto, Jesus Christ and the church. Tasks. Let me conclude because it's getting late. I want to give you a break. There is a need in our institutions for a call to holiness and to credibility in our time. We should not be afraid to challenge our children to deepen their spiritual prayer life and relationship with God. We hesitate to do that, whether we're parents or teachers in a Catholic institution. Why? Because the church and the world both are in desperate need of saintly, holy people in the pews and in the marketplace of the world. That's a distinctiveness that has to be nourished and cherished. What an agenda for Catholic education in the province of Ontario. What a task for your time. We will never be the same again. Amen. So be it, and hallelujah. Better times are coming. Thank you very much. We're watching time because he's going to get us out at 9:30, okay? I was wondering if anybody had any questions, out of that kind of quick history, kind of pulling through to coming to the present time. Have you got any reflections? You're thinking about the situation as you see it at this moment. Do you see that I met a teacher this evening and she used the phrase to me, I'm a teacher and I feel like I'm being battered. It's the word she used. Now, I have to think about that. Is that the sense of having lost the strike? I'm trying to get at it because I'm coming at it from outside and I'm looking at a situation. So do you have any reflections on anything I said this evening on where Catholic schools are going, the Catholic education, be it higher education, such as here at St. Jerome's? Do you see a task that maybe was missed? Excuse me, first name, hon.
I'm Sister Bria Lenore, SSND.
God, SSND. I have to tell you, we got our first Canadian general in the congregation. We elected a Canadian to be our general, and we're so happy about it. So, come on, Sister Dear, what?
When you talk about going through the changes,
Yeah.
when we changed, what was going through my mind was, we always have basics, and the changes are based on those basics. Would you say that those basics are in your last topic on the task, that has to always be our basic?
Okay, you said we always have basics.
Change and have no bottom to it.
Yeah, identify your basic.
Yes.
You identify your basic when you say that. You say basic in faith, basic in professional, basic in academics. When you say that, Steve, when you say...
Go through changes.
Yeah.
Well, the basic for me would be what you mentioned in your talk at the end there about task. We are, how do I put it, we are, God is the basic, and as we educate, we're living for God. Then as these different changes come in, we have to be aware that when we go along with the changes, that the changes are maintaining our basics. God is the top. And so there are some changes that we shouldn't go along with. That's what went through my mind.
They're the non-negotiable parameters that I talked about. Yeah, there's meaning and purpose, but at the same time, you have to think in terms of when I say that when I use that leadership thing about you have to take those basics. Let's say gospel faith. You have to reinvigorate it. You have to re-symbolize it. You have to re-articulate it so with the vocabulary and that has meaning to the circumstances of the new situations in which we are living, you see. So you keep it. It's I was reading, we're talking about a table tonight, an article about Santa Clara University in California, which is Jesuit. And Santa Clara University is that Catholic Jesuit institution in California. And what they're doing, and they're doing it in Boston College, and they're doing it in many other Jesuit institutions, is they are now putting up, let's say, just in your mind, they're putting up a building, a center, and they're calling it Catholic Jesuit Center. Now the question immediately comes to your mind, what are you putting up another building calling Catholic Jesuit Center when you've got a Santa Clara University that is Catholic and Jesuit? You see? So why is it that Boston College is putting up, $3 to $6 million, has had what they call Jesuit studies, Catholic studies, you see, and somebody else? But why? Is it a duplication? So what we're saying is that many of our institutions, Catholic institutions, teach. I'm quoting from this article, it's appeared in America, I think September 27th, 1997, had talked about reinvigorating. Our identity always gets reinvigorated in a hostile environment. We're like the Jesuits, they're only good when they're oppressed. Do you know what I mean? They really are. They're only good when they're evicted from a country or something, you see. Something gets tough, you see. Then they come to the fore, and when they're comfortable and that, But what they're saying is that, and what the article did, which I thought was quite interesting, he traced what happened to higher education. Some people may, and what he's trying to say is that we went through a period where in our institutions of higher ed, say colleges, universities, we taught things, we taught classics, we taught Thomistic theology, we taught the Summa, and he mentions people like there was a heyday of that classicism when you had Jacques Maritain and Etienne Gilson and Christopher Dawson and all this, and you read all those books and the Catholic philosophers, and what he's saying is that we had, our institutions then began to talk about moral and ethics, but they talked about ethics, and they talked about service, and they talked about duty, and he said they really were sort of like civil or patriotic terminology that we packaged with a little bit of religious packaging to it. We would throw in a scripture text or something like, etc. But he said it wasn't really the heart of Christianity and Catholicism, and it wasn't the Jesuit ethos. And he claims that the institutions, people today in this era may not be interested in Thomistic and Summa. They are looking at a faith, and they're looking for a God, and they're looking for something that means something to their life. We have new moral, ethical questions out there. We have all this. So what is it today? And the faith and the gospel and all that. So that's what the center is going to do. It's going to grapple with Catholicism, the faith, the gospel, and how it's articulated today, and how it is applied to the problems that the people have, seeking some meaning, some faith with God, some kind of a life with God, some kind of a spiritual life, and then all the moral issues of life, who pulls plugs, what does this, cloning, all this, what is this? That is what that institution is going to do. He used a fascinating thing. He took that Lazarus story in the gospel, not the raising of Lazarus, the poor man begging for a drink of water and doesn't get it. And he said, it's interesting that we taught at one time that whole gospel story was a gentle urging of us to be charitable and kind, give that cup of water, so to speak. He said what we didn't see it was really a vigorous summoning to a radical justice. So you see, you reinterpret that gospel story that was, when I was growing up, maybe gentle urging of charity. Okay? Now you look at that gospel story and you see it in a very different light, and you say it was really calling us maybe to justice, to radical justice. So you have the difference between charity and justice. You've got to reinterpret things, what I'm saying, for the situation and the time that we're living in. Do you see? So that how does that faith relate to today's problems and people's lives? Because that's the important thing. So that's kind of, in that sense, you have non-negotiables. Yeah, it's there are some non-negotiables to our faith. Yeah, those parameters, and they can be basic in that sense. I see this province. As I said, it's. I was talking to a large group. I forget. You have so many, initials to things. Oxco, but anyhow. But the priest, I gave a talk, and I used the imagery very differently. I used a scripture text about two conversations, one behind the wall, one at the wall. It's a marvelous imagery in the Book of Kings. But my argument was that the Catholic educators must join in the conversation. You've got to go to the wall, and you've got to talk to, if you want to say, your government. You see, but you've got to, when you get to that conversation at the wall, you've got to bring something to it. You've got to enrich it. You've got to enlarge it. And you've got to learn from it, too. You've got to bring our alternative view of life and reality and education to them. But you've got to know it. You've got to believe in it. But I believe in the conversation and the dialogue. Now, when I got finished, I was very pushing people to get into that government, to talk to them. I was doing the conversation, if you will. This priest got up after me and just took a entirely different thing. He says, it's all over. Catholic education is finished in the province of Ontario. You've got a government that is essentially inimical to the whole system, and eventually it's not nipping at heels, as Sister Clare said. It's not taking out a bite out of it. It's going to literally wipe it out. So he came and took the whole other different thing. Now, I don't know. I'm saying I'm watching it all. But I've seen, when I've been up here, I've been with very committed people. I've been just committed educators, and people are going to keep this system, and they're going to make sure that it stays, and they're working at it. They've got courage. It's marvelous what I see working, but I don't know. You've got two people looking at it very differently. Could it be over? Are you going the way of Newfoundland, Quebec? I don't know. Quebec, in the sense that the schools were then put not into religious separations, they were put into language. French singers speak in English and so on. And so they eliminated what they call any religious, classifications, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what does that mean then for the province of Ontario? Do you have a government who's inimical? It certainly has got a different way of looking at education. and it's stripping down. That's a sure bet. Anything else that you see should be a task, of a task? First name?
It's Lyudmila.
Lyudmila.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Lyudmila. You want to say it nice and loud so they can hear what you...
There is a message I am getting from you.
Mm-hmm.
Stay with your roots
Mm-hmm.
and change with time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I want to stay with my roots, I have to be passionate about things I am doing.
Mm-hmm.
But my time tells me passion is dying. There are too many, we see so much of the world. Rather than be passionate, we have to accept another human being, which means people are very confused. You're giving the message, be passionate, but stay with time. But time telling me something completely different. Time tells me it's time for you to be accepting. And if you are passionate about what you're doing, it's very difficult. You are living in the tunnel, and it is very difficult to see the other human being, So what is it that you are doing? People get confused.
You have to be passionate about your story. if I can put it that way. You've got to know it. You've got to be passionate about our story. We have to have great respect for another story. Do you see? Our distinctiveness can enrich other people's stories, and we can be enriched by other people's stories. But if you water down your distinctiveness, you got nothing to offer anybody. So that you have great respect for other people's distinctiveness. But you have to have passion about what you believe. You have to have commitment. You have to know it though first. You have to know what we're about. Then you've got to have great passion for what our story is and our beliefs. You have to respect for other people's. I think the Jesuits, Michael Buckley at Boston College, is a theologian, says, we are openness with roots. I think is the way he tries to classify it when he talks to higher ed. He says, you got to be open to the other stories. There's a respect to the other stories. But we got to have our roots. And you got to be very strongly rooted and very passionate to your roots. Now, your roots can be enriched from other people's stories, too. But do we believe our story? If they have that passion of that kind of belief of our story. I was doing something recently at a high school, just in Advent, and the principal said it was our own academy, and she said to me, I want to have a day of retreat for the faculty. Well, so we were doing it, and of course, naturally, I had to do it with the Advent message, which was the incarnation. So I was talking. Now, two of the faculty were Jewish. And we had a break, a coffee break we had, and I saw the two gentlemen approach the principal. Now, they wanted to leave because of their faith. Jesus Christ is not the Messiah, so, they don't want to hear this story. So she called me over. See, my argument is, I expect you to respect my story. You're always the oppressed. The oppressed can become the oppressor. Do you see? I'm willing to respect your story. I was in England. They have so many Muslims in the Catholic schools in England. And I was talking to the teachers in England. They said, oh, it's wonderful, Sister Clare, because we learn all about the Quran. And they talk to us about their And I said, fine, and what do you say in your other part of the conversation? I mean, what do you add to them? I mean, I'm willing to respect them, but what's our story? What's the roots of everything? Do you see? Wonderful openness to your story. I'm willing to respect it and hear it. Do you see? But I expect the same back. But we have to know our story. We have to have great passion and belief and commitment to our story. it's that kind of thing. But I think Mike Buckley puts it nice. We have to have an openness. I am willing to hear everybody's story. I don't care if it's Buddhist or Muslim. I'm ready to hear your story. But we have to have an openness with roots to our own story. At the North. And in that sense is that passion of it all. Sir? Okay.
Yeah, I get the impression so far tonight in some ways you've been kind of gentle with us. In the sense that, let me put it bluntly, you think we know our story here in Ontario. You know an awful lot about our history, maybe more so than most of us in this room.
Yeah. I had to study it, though, yeah. I had to because I was coming up speaking, you know what I mean? And when you come up and they'll say, oh, what does she know? So, yeah, I had to read everything, and I had to listen, and I listened to people for a long time, my first 2 years. And I had to learn it. Yeah, but like everybody, it's people don't really know their own little history, The only thing that I worry about is, and we have it, we have it in the States too, is you see you've got young people who came in after Bill 30. I'm just trying to make that point, that have no experience of want. They never suffered any want. They didn't go through that poverty experience. They didn't have to worry about the bingos. You see, you've got a group of people who have no sense of what I'm talking about that past. They've always had it. They got good salaries. They had money for all the things they needed. They had nice buildings, but put up wonderful schools. You have beautiful schools. I'm just trying to say, so you got a group of teachers here, no fault of their own, but they don't know that story. They don't know that history. They come out of the promised land. And they get to be very nervous when 104 and 160 were being passed. I have to be honest with you, though. I have yet to... you haven't given it to me, and what caused Bill 160 to get passed? I haven't figured that out. I have to be honest with you, because, when I saw the strike and I saw it going for 2 weeks, that I'm sitting there at home and I'm saying, gee, they're great. They're hanging in there, Johnson's going to have to give in. And I was kind of thinking that... I couldn't, and so that I haven't quite got an answer on that. I don't know what, but I'm trying to get you. You're going to be on two fronts. You've got an educational, professional model that you got to talk about. I'm talking about curriculum. But I'm just saying, you also got this Catholic. So you've got that, how to be faithful to those roots. And the crisis sometimes is not from without. The crisis is from within. Yeah, it's the polarization of the Catholic community on many things. So we're having, I was making a reference to a new book out, and I know of this, it's Morris, it's called The Catholic Church, but he calls this last time period in the Catholic Church in the United States as a crisis time. But he says the crisis is within. We're becoming a far right and we're becoming a far left church, and nobody wants to sit down to do that dialogue or conversation for common ground here.